Pentecost. It's a day that we celebrate on the calendar in the church, but it's one of those days that we really celebrate or participate in all year round. That is to say, you and I should be open at all times and in all places to the Spirit, to what the Spirit would have us do, to how the Spirit would have us act, to accomplish the purpose of God in our life. Because without the Spirit, well, I've never found a way to accomplish much of anything. The Spirit is what gives us the motivation. The Spirit is what gives us the transformation. The Spirit is what gives us the power to accomplish God's purpose. Whenever I take it into my own hands, that's a surefire way to faith. By the way, while we're talking about decorations and so forth, the worship service was also decorated with some fine music this morning. As one old-timer said, if that doesn't light your fire, your wood's wet. That's good stuff. And we appreciate that. It is hard for us on this side of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus to understand what it was like to participate in the life of the faith community prior to those events. And one of the reasons it is so difficult for us to grasp is because of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is available to each of us all the time, everywhere. That was not always so. The Spirit was seen as dwelling in the temple, specifically dwelling in the Holy of Holies. And that was where one went to draw close to God, but not to get too close for fear that you would be struck down. You had to do it in the proper order. You had to do it in the appropriate way. You had to do it, even the priest had to be highly concerned about the way they approached and went into the Holy of Holies. They even tied a rope to the ankle of the high priest as he went in there so that if he made a mistake, they could drag his body out without having to desecrate the temple by going in themselves. So, the Holy Spirit being available to everyone is a remarkable and radical notion laid on top of a radical event in the life of the church whenever Jesus is resurrected from the dead. We look at Easter and think of usually two events. We think of the crucifixion and we think of the resurrection. What we often fail to understand and to take into our lives, incorporate into our practice so much, is the ascension of Jesus and the pouring out of the Spirit on all flesh. If you want to understand this better, read again that passage from Joel that was actually read twice this morning for emphasis. Right? It is so incredible that God would pour out His Spirit on everyone. No distinction. Doesn't matter if you're male. Doesn't matter if you're female. Doesn't matter matter if you're rich, doesn't matter if you're poor, doesn't matter if you're black, doesn't matter if you're white. All of those barriers are erased. All of those seeming standards have no validity any longer. He pours His Spirit out on all flesh, on everyone. And all people are equally able to attend to the Spirit and to receive the Spirit and to be used by the Spirit. It's the descent of the dove. And once again, my little thing here is not cooperating, but I'm ready this morning. The Holy Spirit gives us power. The Holy Spirit gives us power. Can I tell you that I'm a little concerned about, not this church, but about the church today? The church has forgotten, it seems to me, that it is an empowered body. The church has forgotten that it is not simply a placeholder for all things holy, that it's not some sort of just vestibule or museum that pays tribute to all of those things that God has done in the past. The church is the laboratory through which God works today. The church is the place where His Spirit and His people connect in such a way that His people can then carry out His agenda in the world. It's a little bit like that classic episode from TV in the 1960s, the Andy Griffith Show. Y'all remember Andy Taylor, the sheriff of Mayberry, when he was out of town, and his deputy, Barney Fife, is in charge. And he deputizes the local mechanic. This is Gomer. The two deputies are walking down the street one evening when they notice that someone is robbing the town's bank. They hide behind a car. They're afraid, and they don't know what to do. Finally, Gomer looks at Barney and says, excitedly, "Shazam! We need to call the police!" In utter exasperation, Barney shouts back, "We are the police." Sometimes I think we in the church are saying, "Shazam! We need to call the church." But we are the church. If you're looking for God's power, you should be able to find it in the church. I'm not talking about this building. I'm talking about the people. If you need a touch of God's healing grace, you need to call. You need to be able to call the church, and the church needs to be able to respond. If you need encouragement in your life because your life is dark, you need to find the church. Because the church is a place where the Spirit moves. The church is a place where the Spirit leads. The church is the place where the Spirit empowers and grants gifts to His people. And it's all His people, without restriction. Power. The Holy Spirit empowers us. If you don't think that that is evidenced in the New Testament with the transformation from the disciples, this ragtag bunch of folks that they don't know a plan from a pea. Suddenly becoming this emboldened, vocal, vibrant force, attracting thousands to their side because they want what they've got. And what they've got is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit being poured out in power to them. The Holy Spirit is power, and the Holy Spirit pours. Now, it's not past tense, not poured, not sometime, long time ago. We used to think that the Holy Spirit came around every once in a while. This is the Holy Spirit pouring itself upon all flesh, upon us, upon His church. Reader's Digest wrote of the late Harvey Pinnock. For 90-year-old golf pro Harvey Pinnock, success came late. His first golf book, Harvey Pinnock's Little Red Book, has sold more than 1 million copies, which his publisher believes makes it one of the biggest things in the history of sports books. His second book, And If You Play Golf, You're My Friend, has already sold nearly 750,000 copies. But anyone who imagines that Pinnock wrote the books to make money doesn't know the man. In the 1920s, Pinnock bought a red spiral notebook and began jotting down observations about golf. He never showed the book to anyone except his son until 1991, when he shared it with a local writer and asked if he thought it was worth publishing. The man read it and told him yes. He left word with Pinnock's wife the next evening that Simon & Schuster had agreed to an advance of $90,000. When the writer saw Pinnock later, the old man seemed troubled. Finally, Pinnock came clean. With all his medical bills, he said, there was no way he could advance Simon & Schuster that much money. The writer had to explain that Pinnock would be the one to receive the $90,000. People often have used that reaction of Pinnock to the fabulous gift of salvation offered in Jesus Christ. We ask, what must we do? God answers, just receive. We don't have to put up $90,000 for the Holy Spirit. We don't have to put up or shut up. We don't have to fish or cut bait. We've got to receive. We have got to open our sails. We have got to trim our sails to receive the gust of wind that comes and fills the sails and moves us along. If we will put ourselves in a position where God can use us for His purpose, He will take advantage of that opportunity. And He will use us in ways that we cannot imagine. And it doesn't matter how old you are or how young. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter how much experience you have. It is the Spirit that does the work of the church through its people. It is the Spirit that empowers us to live the life that God calls us to. Without the Spirit, we are powerless. But the Spirit pours Himself on all flesh. The Spirit is available today to you and me. The Spirit Spirit is a power that pours presence.